In case you live under a rock, there's no doubt in my mind that you've at least heard of Palworld. It's already sold 19 million copies, which is actually insane. Everyone perceives Pokemon as untouchable in the monster catching genre, but Palworld might give it some necessary competition, which might be the push Pokemon needs to up their game. So what exactly can Pokemon learn from Palworld's success? But first, what is Palworld? I've been watching Palworld like a hawk ever since it first got announced, so it coming out of nowhere didn't really catch me by surprise. However, although I knew it was coming, I never would have predicted this type of success. I can't lie. I was thinking this game might flop, mostly because other monster catching games like Temtem tried to do what Pokemon was doing and failed miserably. But here's where Palworld is different. While Palworld tries to play off of the idea that it's basically Pokemon with guns, it really isn't much like Pokemon at all. Pokemon is a turn-based creature catching RPG, but Palworld is a survival crafting creature catching game. Aside from having magical creatures you store in balls and fight against each other, they're completely different. So I don't think it's really fair to compare the two, but people won't shut up about comparing them, so I'll do my best. The Pokemon in this world are called Pals, who would have thought? Though I tend to accidentally call them Palmon, which would probably get them sued by not only the Pokemon company, but Digimon as well. But anyways, I do really like the designs and art style of a lot of these Pals. There's cute ones, cool ones, tough ones, and dumb ones. There's something here for everyone. A lot of the Pals have a very strong Pokemon inspiration. You can just tell by looking at them. This one is Zorua and Clefairy, this one is Goodra and Breloom, and this one is just straight up Piplup Jr. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just because they borrow inspiration from already existing Pokemon doesn't make them horrible. They're still putting their own spin on them, and you can obviously tell the difference between the two. There's a difference between taking inspiration and just copying, and this is definitely an inspiration territory. I know a lot of you are probably screaming at your screen right now and rushing to the comments to tell me that they stole designs and that they used AI, and we'll get to that later in the video. Just sit tight. Each Pal has its own traits, which are kind of similar to nature's in Pokemon, but not all traits are good. One of them is literally called Slacker, not a very good trait to have, but I feel like these are kind of better because in Pokemon, you're only limited to one trait, but in this game, you can have multiple. You can even pass down traits by breeding to have the ultimate Pal, or ultimate Slacker, I guess. There's also crossbreeding. Sorta. It's a cool addition that even Pokemon hasn't really attempted, and while the crossbreeding isn't too crazy, like you can't distinguish which two Pals were created to create one, all it really does is make a new variant with a different type and tweak design to match its new type, which is honestly enough for me since there's so many different possibilities. There's not a lot of them right now, but I can imagine they'll have multiple for every Pal. If Pokemon were to attempt something similar, they'd have a lot of work to do because there's so many different possible combinations they could make, so I doubt they'll ever attempt it. Something I find really strange about Palworld is that it has no evolutions for any of the Pals, and I'm not sure why they decided to not include them. It kind of makes me feel like there's no way for me to make my Pals stronger. I mean, there is with the use of sacrificing Pal souls to upgrade their stats, but they don't physically look stronger, and I feel like that's a big part. Evolutions are one of my favorite parts about Pokemon. Catching what seems like a weak, small creature and watching it grow up into an absolute monster capable of causing havoc is so fucking cool, but you don't really get that feeling in Palworld. You also don't really get as attached to Pals in Palworld. They're all kind of replaceable. As soon as you get one that's better than the last, you're like, okay, bye. Palworld also has their own version of shiny Pokemon called Alpha Pals, or Lucky. I've seen both of these names thrown around, so I don't know which one it is. I know Legends Arceus also had Alpha Pokemon, but I'm calling these the shiny equivalent because they're rare and have a sparkle icon. They're basically just bigger versions of their respective Pal, but they're still pretty cool, and I'm glad that they actually have a sound effect when they're around. Take some notes, Game Freak! Shiny Pokemon will always be cooler though. Alternate colored creatures are just way cooler than a bigger one. I hope Pokemon reintroduces alphas in some way because it's kind of sad that they're stuck in Legends Arceus. Graphics and animation. Palworld looks really pretty for a random indie game, and while I don't think Pokemon needs to be hyper realistic or have cutting edge graphics, they do need to improve upon them at least a little bit. Pokemon has just been lacking in this regard for quite a while now. I always say that gameplay is more important than graphics, but it's starting to get kinda sad. When you compare other Nintendo games to Pokemon, the difference in quality is clear. You would think Pokemon's frame rate would be stable since it's a AAA title, but it's not. It's god-awful. So what the fuck is happening, Game Freak? Pokemon isn't all too graphically impressive, and there's other Switch games that have multiple models loaded at once without their game freaking out. And it's not like they're doing any crazy animations. You're literally just walking around. So what is going on? This is something Yandere Dev would struggle with. Why is a multi-million-dollar company struggling with optimization? I just genuinely cannot fathom why. They really need to learn how to finally optimize optimize their games. It would do wonders. They have no excuse for why Pokemon runs so poorly. Something that was immediately clear to me was how well Palworld is optimized. I'm playing on my PC, so maybe that's just my PC powering through it, but you can see pals from pretty far away, which again is sadly not the case at all in Pokemon. You have to be right in their face before they even have the chance of loading in. And this is something that has always confused me. Why? Even in Palworld, regardless of how many pals are around me, my game doesn't lag or show any struggle, even with all of the particle effects when they get into an all-out fight at my base. Holy fuck, this is horrifying. Yeah, my game has crashed a few times, but the game just came out, so I'm sure all the bugs and glitches will get ironed out with updates, which is another thing Pokemon needs to learn. I genuinely thought that Scarlet and Violet's frame rate issues would be fixed eventually. That's what updates are for, after all. But no! The game is still like that. Why? The gameplay. When I first played Palworld, I was surprised as to how similar it was to Arc. It's way more similar to Arc than Pokemon, which isn't a bad thing. I just wasn't expecting it. What I love about Palworld is how much freedom you have. Yeah, in Scarlet and Violet, you sort of have the same freedom, but the sheer scale of Palworld's map is insane. It's absolutely massive. Every time I thought I've reached the end, I was wrong each time. You're free to go wherever you want, just as long as you can survive there anyway. Palworld's whole gameplay loop is extremely addicting. You constantly have something new to achieve, which in most games can lead to burnout pretty fast. But because Palworld takes inspiration from Pokemon, Arc, and Breath of the Wild, you get to cycle between the best parts of each of those games. You get to go catch pals, fight them, challenge bosses. Then when you're done, go back to your base where you can build, craft, and upgrade your farms to make things even more efficient. Then when you're done with all of that, you have more pal spheres, and you can get back to exploring the world and catching more pals. It's perfect. I think Pokemon needs to improve their gameplay loop just a little bit. While it is fun catching and battling Pokemon, aside from the story breaking up those segments, that's about all you get. Older Pokemon games used to do this, like with Contest, PokeStar Studios, and I don't know, the Underground in Diamond and Pearl, but they kind of stopped doing that after Generation 5. Right now, all we really have is catching Pokemon, battling, and that's about it. I still think that they could have easily fixed this by blending some of Legends Arceus into Scarlet and Violet's formula. You know, like completing little side missions, catching multiple of the same Pokemon, alphas, stuff like that. Pokemon just needs something more. I don't know what it's missing, but I'm sure if we take a look at Palworld, we'll be able to figure it out. A lot of the moves in Palworld are copy and paste of one another with a new coat of paint, which is kind of disappointing, but I'm sure they'll add more eventually. It's also weird that pals can only learn 3 moves. I don't know. Also, you can only have up to 5 pals in a party instead of 6. It just feels like something's missing. And of course, the part everyone is talking about, the guns. Oh boy, the guns. You actually don't get your first gun until really late into the game, and it's not even that good of a gun. It's a musket. But once you do acquire the big boy guns, it is very satisfying to just shoot everything in sight. Mechanics. The movement can be kind of janky at times. Not like in a way that makes it unplayable or anything. It just takes some getting used to. But it's not as bad as riding Miraidon and Koraidon in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I don't know why they feel so clunky, but they do. I love that you're able to send your pal out to walk with you whenever you want. Legends Arceus sorta did this, and Scarlet and Violet did as well, but in Scarlet and Violet, it fucking sucks. It wasn't even like a proper roaming mode. It was more of an auto battle type thing. Palworld finally did what we wanted. You just send your pal out, it roams around with you, and if you get into a fight, it fights alongside you. You can even ride it, and if you don't want it out anymore, you can just call it back. It's as simple as that. I don't know why Pokemon is struggling with this. Please, just fix it. It's so simple. Speaking of fixing things though, the AI of pals sometimes makes it so they get stuck, so they won't eat or work, leaving them to starve. It's really annoying having to call all of them back each time that happens. They said that they are fixing this though, so that's a relief. You also have random raids that can happen at your base, caves that you can explore, as well as bosses and raider camps that you can infiltrate and rescue pals from. Also, just a tiny thing, you can pet your pals, which aside from Pokemon we've never been able to do. Please let us pet our Pokemon. That's like the whole point, just building a bond with them. The multiplayer in Palworld is pretty great. You just send your friend a code and boom, they can join. You can even have dedicated servers in the future, so your friends can join your world even when you're not playing. Very convenient. Pokemon seriously needs to step up their game with multiplayer. They've been doing better recently, with Scarlet and Violet having union rooms that your friends can join and they can basically do whatever they want. But it isn't as seamless as many wish it would be. Since Nintendo servers are complete garbage, players often get disconnected and then they gotta set up the whole union room all over again just for them to join back. But it's 5 minutes that can stack up easily and just just be avoided with a simple join request. Like, I don't know why. Why do you have to restart the entire room just for one person to join? And what's the point of limiting it to 4 players in the first place? We have 100-player battle royale games, and you're telling me if too many people join my Pokemon game, it'll crash? That's stupid. Let us have 16, or hell, I'll even take 8. Anything. It's just a nice feeling knowing that you're not alone on your journey, and that there's other trainers catching, battling, and exploring just like you. That's what makes Poke MMO so appealing. There's a whole social aspect, so you aren't isolated, and you also get the same feeling of socialness in Palworld. You can check up on your friends at any time and just see what they're up to. The world. While I did say the world in Palworld is super massive, as a result, it feels more empty than Pokemon's. I do really like the open world that we get to explore, but it kind of suffers from the same thing that Legends Arceus did. A vast open world, but nothing to fill the void in between. I like the feeling of exploring and coming across a nice little town with its own identity. And Pokemon sorta did this right in Scarlet and Violet, but you can't enter any of the houses, which was pretty lame. And most of the NPCs are useless, though it just kind of feels dead. I guess this kind of does make sense though, since the whole point of the game is to create your own base, and that would be pretty hard if there's constant towns and structures anywhere remotely nice. But I think they could have struck a healthy balance one way or another. Something Palworld does fall flat in is the music and story. The music is more Breath of the Wild inspired, which I guess makes sense for its survival-based gameplay, and while it's good for the atmosphere, it doesn't really have any iconic tracks that stick out to me. Don't get me wrong, I like the battle theme, but I can't hum it back to you because I just straight up don't remember it. As for the story, there isn't really a story in Palworld at all. Yeah, there's journals with lore and stuff, but those are purely optional, and I don't really feel like going out of my way to read them. Pokemon just has way better music, and the story can be hit or miss at times, but hey, at least it's there. And some people might say, oh my god, Palworld sucks because it has no story. Yeah, Minecraft doesn't either. It has lore, but there's no story. It's a survival game. Replayability. Palworld already has a content roadmap of what they want to add in the future, which is going to be amazing for people who want to play this game for a long time. Instead of releasing a new version of their game every year like Pokemon does, they're going to polish the fuck out of Palworld, which I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate. I do wish Game Freak could do the same with Pokemon, but since Pokemon is more generation based, and they want to introduce new characters, stories, and Pokemon, I understand why they release so many new games. While Pokemon can't exactly follow in Palworld's footsteps in that regard, it is nice that Palworld is going with that approach instead of being greedy little bastards. They plan on fixing the AI for pals, adding PvP, new islands, which oh my god, there's gonna be so many, and of course, more pals. And if they keep this up at a decent rate, in a few years, oh my god, this game is gonna be so amazing. They even plan on implementing crossplay, which is only gonna bump the player count even more, and make playing with your friends that much easier. In Palworld, you have access to multiple save files, which are more equivalent to Minecraft worlds than save files, but they essentially serve the same purpose. I really wish Pokemon would finally let us just create another save file instead of having to use another Switch profile, because while not hard to do, it's just sort of annoying. That proves that it is possible to have multiple saves on one game. They just refuse to do it for whatever reason. Controversy. Oh my god, where do I even begin? A ton of people are saying to not support this game because it supports animal cruelty, and oh my god, get a fucking grip. It's a game. You sound like an old person saying video games cause violence. Yeah, the Civil War was started because someone was playing too much Grand Theft Auto. Saying this game supports animal cruelty is the exact same thing people were saying about Pokemon in the 90s, and I guess even now apparently. If you actually want to be an animal activist, go do something! The fuck is a forum telling people not to play a game gonna do? You're useless. Go donate or something. Literally anything else. If you neglect your pals, they get injured, depressed, refuse to work, or just straight up faint. So the game encourages you to take care of them, but it also gives you the option of being a heartless monster. If you don't want to abuse your pals, good. The game rewards you for it. Having a moral choice you can make makes the choice feel more impactful. Like if I was forced to take care of my pals, it would feel more like a chore. But because I'm not being forced, and I genuinely just want to take care of my pets, I'll do it. You don't have to make sweatshops. It's like saying Minecraft supports slavery and animal cruelty because you have the option to make a prison and make your animals suffer. Blame the player, not the game. And of course, the part everyone has been waiting for, the AI and fan art theft allegations. Steam's AI policy states that you're required to disclose whether or not your game contains or used AI in any way, and Palworld doesn't have an AI label on it, but people are claiming that it is using AI because the CEO of Pocket Pair, which are the people who made Palworld, has shown interest in AI in the past, so they're saying that it's definitive proof that Palworld was made using AI, which is fucking ridiculous. I also have shown interest in AI. I made a video where I was messing around with an AI bot that could apparently generate new Pokemon. Does that mean everything I make is AI generated? No! Pocket Pair also made a game called AI Art Imposter, which contains AI art, obviously. They clearly disclosed this. It's even in the name. It's just a cool concept. AI art is on the rise, and people are having more and more trouble figuring out what's made by humans and what's not. So let's make a game about it. It's not that deep. There's nothing inherently wrong with AI. It's only wrong when artists have their art stolen without permission to fuel an AI algorithm. And if Pocket Pair did use any AI to make Palworld, it's likely that the AI algorithm was fueled by the design team's own drawings, and they're free to do whatever they want with those drawings. It's theirs. If they want to use AI as a tool to help themselves, go for it, just as long as they aren't stealing other people's art without permission, which we have no proof that they did. Palworld got a reveal trailer in 2021, but AI art started becoming possible around 2022, a whole year later. And keep in mind, the AI around that time was not perfect at all. In fact, it was really scuffed. But in that 2021 trailer, we saw a ton of PAL designs already implemented into the game. So since this trailer came out in 2021, let's say it took them about a year to get to this point, which would mean that they had to have worked on this in 2020, and AI art was completely unheard of during this time. The timeline just doesn't match. So until we have definitive proof that Palworld used AI, you guys are just coping. Unbased claims with a false narrative to fuel your own agenda. Just stick with the facts. A lot of people are claiming that this PAL right here called Kelpsy was made with AI, but would you look at that? It's right there in the 2021 trailer. Apologize to Kelpsy. It's so cute. Some people keep bringing up this tweet posted by the Pocket Pair CEO as evidence that they used AI, which is dumb. He's literally quote retweeting a BuzzFeed article talking about Pokemon AI. And like I said before, it looks like shit. Look at this and tell me you have an idea. You don't. They're just blobs. People are just grasping at straws that aren't there. And do some research before you make crazy claims, like this guy. Palworld tweeted about this PAL called Hang You, but this artist was outraged, claiming that Palworld stole his Fakemon design, which caused a ton of people to get really mad, saying that Palworld steals all kinds of Fakemon. And many people still believe this to be true and often use it as evidence, but this isn't the case at all. Looking at their Fakemon compared to Hang You, I can see why they would think Palworld stole it. However, doing a little bit of research, they would soon realize that Hang You actually predates their Fakemon design by 2 whole years, meaning that Hang You came first. They later went back on their claims, saying that they didn't steal their design, and like I said, people still use this as quote-unquote proof that Palworld steals Fakemon. It's purely just a coincidence. I'm pretty sure Palworld only looked at Pokemon for inspiration, just like the Fakemon artist did, but apparently it's fine when a Fakemon artist takes inspiration. Obviously, I'm saying this because people are being extremely hypocritical. It's fine for Fakemon artists to take inspiration from Pokemon, just like how it's fine for Palworld to do the same. As soon as people found out that the Fakemon artist made their design after Palworld, everyone dropped their pitchfork and didn't care anymore. And I'm not saying the Fakemon artist is at fault. The point I'm trying to make is that if this game was made by a bunch of Pokemon fans, and this was a fan game, nobody would have a problem with it. In fact, many of you hating on it would be praising it. Some people are saying that maybe the Fakemon artist stole Hang You. Some people are defending him though, saying, how would he be able to rip off Palworld if he didn't even know it existed? That's the point I'm trying to make. He didn't know about Palworld, and Palworld didn't know about his design. Nobody is at fault here. It's just a coincidence. People can come up with similar designs, and this is just proof of that. But if you still want to claim that they take Fakemon designs, then why don't we direct our attention towards the Pokemon company? Because there are multiple instances of them doing this. This is a Fakemon designed by Bulby Boy. It's called Dolphlate, and it has 2 different forms. It was designed in 2020. Isn't that strange? It looks very similar to Palafin, who debuted in 2022. The Pokemon company stole this. I mean, it has to be true. They're both dolphins with heart designs with an alternate form that makes them look buff. Or what about this one? Diego Monster Lab created this Pepper Fakemon in 2021, and Scovillain debuted in 2022. Pokemon stole this as well. They're both Pepper Pokemon with 2 heads standing on 2 feet with 2 of the heads showing 2 different emotions. Here we have Wivara from the Atis Fakemon region created in 2021, which looks very similar to Tarantula, who debuted in 2022. They're both insect-looking things with a string cocoon bulb thing on top of them. But everyone turns a blind eye when Pokemon supposedly steals designs. Do I truly think that Pokemon stole these Fakemon designs? No, I don't. But I'm flipping the logic many people apply to Palworld and applying it to Pokemon. If you refuse to acknowledge these instances, you're a hypocrite and are just looking for reasons to be mad. People can have similar ideas. That's just an inevitability. People keep creating these charts to show what parts of a PAL resemble a Pokemon, and it's really stupid. It's so easy to take a design and just nitpick the fuck out of it trying to draw any similarities to anything. Let's try it out on some Pokemon. Here is Gengar. Huh. That's weird. It looks like Burbaby from Dragon Quest. They're both blobby creatures with spikes on them and a big smile. See? Nidoran closely resembles spiked hair from Dragon Quest as well. They're both purple mouse creatures with big bunny ears and a horn on its head. This is Doberman from Digimon, a black and brown dog that sorta resembles a Hellhound that debuted in 2001, a year before Houndoom, who looks very similar to Doberman, and they're both Hellhounds. Crazy, right? This is a Fire Rabbit Fakemon. That's weird. It looks like a Chespin and Baneri fusion with an added fire typing. This is just straight up a robot Heracross from Digimon. Shellmon is just a pink creature with a shell on its back, just like Slowbro. You can even use this logic against other Pokemon. People did this many years ago when they saw the leaked final evolutions of the Generation 5 starters. They compared Samurott to Dialga, Serperior to Milotic, and Emboar to Rhyperior. It's so easy. Pokemon doesn't own any animals, or elemental animals. They don't own the idea of a fire fox, or a plant girl, or a witch hat. A Pokemon and a PAL can have the same idea, just like how a Fakemon and a Pokemon can have the same idea. People keep asking to see concept art for Palworld since they think everything is AI generated, and I haven't seen anyone talk about this, so here's some concept art for Palworld that can be found in Pocket Pair's Discord server. And I gotta say, the concept art goes hard. We have some right here for the protagonist, here's some for the bosses, and they look sick. I really like this one too, she's so pretty. Here's concept art for the boss room, and this is a really cool concept art of the Black Marketeer. I love it so much. We don't have any concept art released for the PALs though, which is what people mainly want to see. And while looking for answers, I came across this message in the Discord server. Apparently they don't want to show concept art for PALs for a number of reasons, which I think is strange, but again, that doesn't necessarily prove anything. It's just weird. Maybe they didn't want to show the concept art with the Pokemon they drew inspiration from because of legal trouble, or maybe it's under NDA. Nobody really knows. People are also saying that they stole models from Pokemon, which if true, would be plagiarism. But I don't think they did this because 1. Why go through all the trouble to avoid copyright just to end up ripping models? And 2. A wolf Pokemon is gonna look like a wolf pal at the end of the day. They're both based on the same animal. And 3. Pokemon would have already done something by now. I saw this funny tweet where someone took Mario and Sonic's model and overlaid them over each other and said, "Looks like Sega has some explaining to do," which perfectly describes what people are doing right now. The guy who was comparing Palworld's models of Pokemon even admits that they weren't exact and that they were scaling them to fit better. Even if they did, let Pokemon's lawyers deal with this. You guys need to stop meat writing Game Freak so hard. You don't work for them. They don't know or care about you. This isn't your fight to fight. If this hurts Pokemon, that's their own damn problem. I am a Pokemon YouTuber, but I won't let my Pokemon bias take over and start sucking them off. I love this series a ton, but they're more than capable of doing what needs to be done, if it even infringes on their copyright in the first place. I'm hoping as a result, they'll improve their games, even just a little. Pokemon essentially has a monopoly over the monster catching genre. Nobody's ever able to compete with them, so they're just gonna keep doing the same shit and not improve. And everyone is gonna keep buying their game because they're the most popular one. As a consumer, competition is good to have, so let Pokemon deal with that. And if they don't do anything, they didn't have a case to begin with. Trust me, Nintendo's lawyers will stop at nothing to get their way. Do I think this is going to be the Pokemon killer everyone's saying it will be? Hell no. Again, Palworld is just so drastically different from Pokemon in so many ways that saying it's gonna dethrone Pokemon is really stupid. That's like saying because of Minecraft's success, Pokemon is gonna get dethroned. It makes no sense. Even if it was a turn-based RPG like Pokemon, I still think Pokemon would come out unscathed. Pokemon is the most successful series of all time. Nobody could cause a dent no matter how hard they tried. What I ultimately hope ends up happening is that the Pokemon company sees the success of Palworld and tries to one-up them. I highly doubt that's gonna happen, but I can dream, okay? If you're a complete Pokemon elitist and just put down Palworld claiming it's a ripoff, give it a chance. You can't call something a ripoff and then name like 30 things that are different. Those are 30 reasons why it's not a ripoff. It's like claiming that Digimon is a ripoff of Pokemon when it's not. Same with Yokai Watch. They're all creature catching games, but they're unique in their own way. Being in the same genre doesn't make it a ripoff. This type of thing always happens. When Yokai Watch first came out, I remember hearing Pokemon fans whine and whine calling it a ripoff when the gameplay is very different. Same thing with Genshin Impact. When it first released, everyone was calling it a Breath of the Wild ripoff when they're nothing alike. People just tend to get really territorial and defensive of whatever series they're a fan of, and it's annoying. The two can coexist. If you don't like the game, that's fine. don't play it. Why is it so popular though? I think the reason it's so immensely popular is because it finally does something different with the creature catching genre. For decades, it's more or less just been a turn-based RPG. And while I do like turn-based RPGs, it's something a lot of people find really boring. That's why there's such a divide between Nintendo and Pokemon fans. It's really strange. Like, of course, there's people who play both, like me, but there's a ton of Nintendo fans who have never played a Pokemon game in their life because the turn-based combat just doesn't appeal to them, and that's okay. So Palworld decided to completely throw the turn-based concept out of the window, and if Pokemon really wanted to, they could do that as well. Imagine a real-time Pokemon battle where you take control of your Pokemon, similar to Pokémon Tournament. I think that would be a really cool and interesting way to innovate Pokemon battling. While I do love the strategy part of Pokemon battling, there really isn't that much strategy involved in single player. You can just more or less spam the A button and come out unscathed each time. It's mindless, it's boring, it's repetitive. People just want something new at this point. It's a big ask, I know. I'm just throwing ideas at a dartboard here. But what about the VGC? Well, I'm glad you asked. I've been saying this for so long now, but Pokemon just needs to make their own version of Pokemon Showdown already. It'll give everyone a fair advantage since they all have the same tools. Nobody can cheat, and it also eliminates the part everyone hates about VGC. You can just build a team, fight, and get it over with. Why have others failed? I think the reason games like Temtem failed is because they tried to replicate Pokemon to a T, but Palworld took a step in an entirely new direction, keeping the experience fresh and exciting. Temtem is just another turn-based monster-catching RPG, so why play that when you can just play Pokemon? You can't really say the same about Palworld because of how radically different the two games are, so it'll coexist no matter what. Will they get sued? I'm not a legal expert or anything at all, but I don't think Palworld is getting sued, especially now that they're working directly with Xbox. I think Pokemon is trying to threaten them as a scare tactic, but what can Pokemon really do? The gameplay is both radically different. The designs, while similar, are different enough to where you can distinguish the two and not get confused. There's no real case to be made here. They just gotta cope. If Pokemon was that defensive about their series, Digimon, Yokai Watch, and Temtem would be long gone by now. What can Pokemon do next? I'm not saying Pokemon needs to go full survival mode and let you build houses and farms and give your Pokemon guns. I just think that they need to polish their game. It isn't that Palworld is more fun than Pokemon. The point people are mainly trying to get across is that some random indie dev team was able to make this. It runs smoothly and tries to do something new. People just want a polished experience, not something that's just a half-assed cash grab. The main takeaway the Pokemon company needs to understand from people loving Palworld is that they just need to refine their game. Every other Nintendo game is polished, refined, with no glaring issues. But you can't say the same with Pokemon. Apparently Game Freak claims that they don't have enough people to work on their games. Then hire more people! There's no reason why they can't. They basically print money. Hiring more people would benefit everyone. Game Freak developers don't need to suffer and work twice as hard, and the fans get a more polished game. They need to work on their environment. The world just feels empty, even the towns. Like I said earlier, you can't enter any of the houses, which is just so strange. The graphics and animations need to be improved as well. I'm not one of those people who think Pokemon needs to look hyper realistic with ultra 4K graphics, but they really need to step up their game. Just a little bit. I think it can easily be fixed with just some stylized identity. Legends Arceus looks pretty nice, although I didn't like the warm lighting, it still looks nice. The animations are again something that definitely needs to be fixed. With over 1,000 Pokemon out there, it's only gonna get harder from here, but they seriously need to work on this. And they have. Blastouse's water cannons actually work like water cannons now, which is great. And I think the most important one is optimization. Oh my god, please for the love of god, optimize the next Pokemon game. The main takeaway people get from Scarlet and Violet is bad FPS means bad game, but the game isn't bad, it's just poorly optimized. These are the basic fundamentals of a game, and before they can truly innovate and try new things, they need to fix those basic principles first. Then maybe after we can start getting voice acting, because the cutscenes are really awkward without it. Maybe even a new style of gameplay, or just overall more stuff. The reason I'm so hard on Pokemon is because I love this series to death, and I want the best for it. So seeing this random indie dev team make Pokemon better than Pokemon is just kind of sad. I think a big part of the reason why Pokemon has been struggling so much on the Switch is not because the Switch can't handle it, but because every big Pokemon title on Switch has used a completely different engine. We had the Let's Go games, which had their own engine, Sword and Shield, which had their own engine, Legends Arceus, again, their own engine, and now Scarlet and Violet, which of course had a new engine. They just need to polish one and stick to it for a while. That's more or less what they did in the past with Generation 3 and its remakes, Gen 4 and its remakes, and Gen 5 along with its sequels. This would help them a ton, you know? They can actually focus on working on other things instead of building an engine from the ground up every time. I've never heard people talk about this aspect of Game Freak, which makes me think that maybe they're just not aware. And of course, this is me just speculating. I could be completely wrong on this, but as an outsider, this is what it looks like to me looking into how Game Freak operates. While we would absolutely adore an open world Pokemon game with stunning graphics, voice acting, level scaling, a good story, and soundtrack with tons to do, it's never gonna happen, which is a shame, but it's true. I think what most players want desperately is just a polished open world Pokemon game that doesn't feel like it was put together in a hurry. If this random fucking company can produce something this fun and innovative, the Pokemon company has no excuse why they can't do something better. I'm not saying that Palworld is perfect and can't do no wrong. I agree that Verdash is way too similar to Cinderace. I mean, just look at them. Pokemon doesn't own the idea of an elemental rabbit, but they do own the design, and everything down to the pose, shorts, and body is just a poor copy. Azurobe just straight up stole Primarina's hair, and while it isn't an exact one-to-one model rip, the similarities here are undeniable. I'm not entirely sure what the legality of stealing a hair design is, but since it's not a model rip, I think they're technically okay. Gruntail has Galarian Meowth's face, like straight up, which to be fair, it's a pretty simple face, but there's no denying that's just Galarian Meowth's face. Yeah, stuff like that Palworld is at fault for, but I think the majority of Palworld is fine, and people are just throwing a fit to throw a fit. I also think that most of the people hating on Palworld are just literal children, or man-children, because most of the things they're bashing Palworld for are complete nonsense. They're saying things like Jolthog is just Shaman. Have you seen a hedgehog? Are you stupid? I think the vast majority of people do like Palworld, and it's just a loud minority that are hating on it because it's a quote-unquote copy. The same people who hated on Yokai Watch. What I encourage all of you to do is take a step back and think for yourself. Look at the evidence, conclude if it's concrete, and come to your own conclusion. Don't just blindly bandwagon. That doesn't help anyone. I have no idea what the like to dislike ratio on this video is going to be since most of my fans are Pokemon fans, obviously, but I'm hoping at least some of you have reconsidered your thoughts on Palworld. It's really annoying being a part of a fan base that just blindly attacks people, so I want to do my best to dispel any rumors and educate the Pokemon community. If I at least changed one person's mind, that's enough for me. I still love Pokemon to death, but I like Palworld too, and I'm sure others feel the same way. So to get a better understanding of what people think of Palworld, I decided to go survey and ask people what they think. For their own safety, they will be kept anonymous. What do you think of Palworld?
I think everybody should give it a chance before bashing it. I was iffy about it at first too, but now I really like it.
Bro, Palworld peak. I don't know what's going on, bro. Man, Palworld Pokemon, it don't matter to me, bro. As long as the animals are hot, that's all I care about.
What the fuck?